As some of you may know, the Victorians were obsessed with the supernatural. Now, how does this link to Christmas, you say? Well, it was the Victorian era that actually made it popular to tell ghost stories of the supernatural on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. They were so entranced that even times like Christmas Eve, they would do a seance to contact their loved ones that had passed. It was a time that they liked to reflect upon those that were no longer with them, but they also loved a good scare. So originally, this is where the tradition of telling ghost stories around a fire with a hot cup of cocoa began. And some still continue to this day. Towards the end of each year, as fireplaces are lit and hot cocoa is made, Americans have made it a tradition to revisit their favourite classic holiday. I say Americans because that's what it says in this article here, and of course I want to give homage to the person that wrote it. However, obviously it started in Victorian England, as it will state. Books, movies and songs, and though ghost stories may seem out of place in present day, holiday celebrations once a Christmas staple, reaching the peak of popularity in Victorian England, as I mentioned previously. A dark and spooky time of year. Like most long-standing cultural customs, the precise origin of telling ghost stories at the end of the year is unknown, largely because it began as an oral tradition without written records. But according to Sarah Cleto, a folklorist specialising in British literature and a co-founder of the Carter Hall School of Folklore and the Fantastic, the season around Winter Solstice, also known as Yule, which is a pagan holiday which many witches partake in, has been part of one of the transition and change. For a very, 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 very long time, this season has provoked oral stories about spooky things in many different countries and cultures all over the world, she says. Furthermore, spooky storytelling gave people something to do during the long dark evenings before electricity. The long midwinter nights meant folks had to stop working early and they spent their leisure hours huddled close to the fire, says Tara Moore, an assistant professor of English at the Elizabethtown College. Plus, you did need to be literate to be able to tell your local ghost story. And of course, we cannot speak about any ghost story without mentioning the Charles Dickens effect. Charles Dickens' 1843 novella A Christmas Carol has forever linked the British author with the holiday season. But his contributions to Christmas in Victorian England, including the tradition of telling and reading ghost stories, extend far beyond Jacob Marley's visit to Scrooge. And if we also think about that film, he has the ghost of Christmas past, present and future. And there is the time in some of the tellings, because there's so many versions, where the film gets quite spooky and quite dark before it gets, funny in places, depending on which version you actually watch. In fact, Cleto says that Dickens played a huge part in popularising the genre in England. He wrote a bunch of different Christmas novellas, several of which involve ghosts specifically, she says, and then he started editing more and more Christmas ghost stories from other people and working those into magazines he was already editing, and that just caught like wildfire. Dickens also helped shape Christmas literature in general, Moore says, by formalising expectations about themes like forgiveness and reunion during the holidays. So whether you do sit down and tell a spooky tale around the fire with a hot drink this evening, or you stick to your other traditions, I hope you enjoy your Christmas Eve. I, for one, shall most definitely be telling and listening to spooky tales.